Right, on to today's session. As I said at the start, welcome, and this is the final virtual meetup in this season 4, which is all about tracking progress. And this season has been supported by the Moore Foundation and is part of a bigger project. We're looking at the future of movement ecology, what questions need to be asked, and what technologies and innovation needs to happen to catapult this field forward. We've had 4 events so far, and they're all up on YouTube if you want to catch up with them. And the next part of this project will be a series of closed, smaller focus group with experts to delve in and prioritize different things that have been floating up throughout the season. Just as a reminder, we're thinking about looking to the future. We're thinking in a couple of different horizons. We're thinking about where investment is needed to push us to the second horizon. What do we already know, the pathway forward, that we just need to throw resource at? We can solve with brute force. Like, we know the pathway forward to solve specific issues. What are those that will get us incrementally further forward? But we're also really interested in looking further in the future, more of the blue sky ideas that are floating around of where could the field go, and we don't quite know how to get there, but what could that field look like? And part of why we've invited these 4 speakers along today is that they have, we hope, have the experience and have been thinking in this space and can have the vision of where this field could go in the future. And we want to hear what that looks like to them and to all of you as well. So we hope it's going to be a really interesting open discussion, thinking, short term into the future where we need to invest, but also longer term, what do we need to start investing in now to jump forward into the future. Just an ethics note, this is part of a bigger research project which we have ethics approval for. We're recording it. It's all going to be available on YouTube, and you're basically giving your consent as to be part of this research by participating in the webinar. If you've got any questions, do contact us. Right, now I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, who is Christian Rutz. Christian's actually, Christian, as you get set up, I'm just going to do a little introduction to you. Thank you, Zoom. If Zoom would stop forcing my screen to do stuff. Right. Christian is a professor of biology at the University of St. Andrews and a founding president of the International Biologging Society. He has diverse research interests and has led teams to push the boundaries of this field through innovative tools, including the first deployments of miniature video cameras and proximity loggers. Christian's also a member of our advisory committee for this project, the Tracking Progress project. And so we're really delighted he's agreed to join us today, and we'll be providing a brief introduction to the topic and laying the groundwork ahead of the other speakers. So thank you so much, Christian. Do you want to take it away?
Thanks a lot, Steph, and hello, everybody. I'm really excited to be here today with you. It's a really exciting session to try and bring everything together. I would just like to acknowledge the funders of our current animal tracking work. It's the Moore Foundation and the National Geographic Society. I thought I should start off by providing a basic framework that perhaps can help us to identify opportunities for making progress and for innovation. And this framework maps roughly on the structure the WILDLABS team has put together for this virtual meetup series. So let's start thinking about the technologies we use. I put tags here, but that could be other technologies. Well, those technologies generate data, which we need to analyze. That was the second meetup we had. Those analysis results or findings are then being shared, and alongside those results, we hope to share the data that underlie them. Of course, implicit in these discussions we had over the first 3 meetups is that everything starts with a question, and usually that question links to addressing some conservation challenge. But there are 2 other things I would like to highlight, and perhaps we can cover them in a bit more depth during today's discussion. And that is the question of animal welfare, which I believe shouldn't be an afterthought. I think it should take center stage in any discussion about the future of this field. And that, of course, relates to both the questions we want and we can ask and the technologies we use for tackling them. But then there's the bigger picture, and that's that all of this depends on the community pulling together. It's all of us. And by community, I mean, not just the researchers, I mean, the manufacturers, I mean, the data scientists, I mean, all of us. And I think it's worth thinking about how we can come together to push the field forward. And yeah, hopefully if we pull everything together, that'll be a good foundation for today's discussion. So I want to very briefly go through this framework, starting with the tags. Of course, the kind of technology we want to use should relate to the question we're asking. And as I mentioned, that should link ideally to some ambition to tackle conservation challenges further down the line. Of course, we all want things to be smaller, lighter, better, faster. And there's really exciting developments in this field, but perhaps today we can focus primarily on new conceptual advances, so new ideas for using technologies. I'm thinking about onboard processing and event triggering, which a lot of people in the field are excited about, as they are being used, for example, in these pioneering anti-poaching tags, or other concepts like drone guiding tags. Thinking about animal welfare, I think it's really important that we bring together best practice protocols. I know they exist for specific taxonomic groups, but the International Biologging Society is running a working group that tries to pull everything together across taxonomic groups. I think that's very important. There's really exciting work happening on minimizing the energetic impacts of tags. We know that size and mass is not all that matters, but also the profile of the tags we use. And here's something I feel quite strongly about. I think we should let tag miniaturization benefit the animals we are studying. I put up this little graphic here to explain what I mean. So as our tags are becoming smaller, we have the ambition to try and study those animals that are gray shaded in this distribution, the smaller animals. So small tags means we can study small animals. But I would like to make a plea for using those small tags on the larger animals we have been studying. I don't think it's helpful to titrate the tag mass to become the maximum allowable for a given species we want to study. So let's use the smallest possible tags on our animals. In terms of analysis, they are, of course, tightly linked to the technologies we use that generate the data. There has already been a lot of talk about machine learning and AI during earlier sessions in this series. I think there's a really exciting development towards real-time and very high-resolution tracking. We are converging on something people in the human sociality research field have called reality mining. We are getting pretty close to mapping reality with some of these technologies, which poses interesting questions for how we analyze those data. Or do we actually have to analyze them if we have mapped reality? I think integration with other data types is really important, and I see huge scope as these data sets are becoming more and more complex and larger for innovation in terms of data visualization. Onwards to data sharing, well, that requires a community push. We all have to pull together to achieve that, and that has massive benefits further down the line for conservation efforts. What I think is really important here is the issue of data standardization, which has come up during the third meetup, and it's something the Biologging Society is also working on with a working group. We talked about public data repositories and collaborative consortia, such as the COVID-19 Biologging Initiative. I want to conclude by talking very briefly about the community, about who we are and how we can work together. I think it's incredibly important to build a unified, diverse, inclusive, welcoming, and supportive community, and to create that space for good, strong collaboration, for identifying synergy, and for driving progress. And to really focus on initiatives that generate benefit for all, and not just some of us. And those really were the guiding principles of the International Biologging Society and one of its main initiatives, the COVID-19 Biologging Initiative. It's trying to bring together the community to work together. I want to end with flagging a forthcoming opportunity. Myself and a few others are editing a special issue in eLife later this year on new frontiers in movement ecology. And there will be a call that announces that shortly. And I hope that the WILDLABS team will be able to share that. But please watch out for that. It would be great to channel some of these ideas into that special issue. And I will leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christian. Yeah, we're more than happy to share that on WILDLABS. Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction. Martin, you're going to be our first speaker. So while you're getting your slides up, I'm going to do a little introduction to you. Right. I really hate how Zoom does that. Right. Martin is the director of the Department of Migration at the Max Planck Institute of Animal Behavior and a professor of ornithology at the University of Konstanz. His work focuses on global migratory patterns in animals, with particular emphasis on conservation, detection of disasters, disease spread, and global change. We've invited Martin here as our first speaker today to share his expertise as a leading researcher in the field of animal movement, and also as the lead of the Icarus initiative, which we've had a lot of questions about over the last few sessions. But for those who don't know, the Icarus initiative is working to install the Internet of Animals using a small object tracking system on the International Space Station. So it's really pushing the field forward in terms of tracking animal movement and using technology to do so. So Martin, do you want to take it away? Martin, just checking you have unmuted yourself.
Sorry about that.
There we go.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the invitation. Great to see you all. And it's really exciting to see Christian's introduction, because I think we'll all give certain aspects of that in our talks. I think what's really exciting about the future is that we can now link together all these informations from intelligent sensors around the world, and that is animals in the Internet of Animals. And that's something that I think all of us are creating together. This is something that is obviously a bottom-up effort in the entire community. Now, I've tried to come up with a few provocative suggestions today, and I hope you bear with me. So the first one is, I think there's only one ecology. And this is something that I often get from people outside our field, that they say, well, why do you have all these different ecologies? What is that all about? Well, I think it's the history of our discipline. I think we started small and now we're going large and global. And I think that's super important, that we continue to study many populations over a long time. And remote sensing people tell us, 3 decades is the minimum. We need global databases for that. We have to include the environment. It's interdisciplinary. And we have to engage citizen scientists, because we want to democratize analyses, and what Christian already said about the applications that we have. Now, the second part, I think, where we need more is to show that what we are doing is really telling us the truth. And we have to show that by doing predictions. If our predictions are wrong, then probably our results are wrong. And other disciplines actually do that. Engineering does it for biomimicry. They do robotics as proof. And if the robots work, then the principle was okay. And agriculture does it all the time. So I think we have to do that as well. And I think that's something that also, Christian has alluded to in his brainchild, the anthropause work of the International Biologging Society. I think we can use these global experiments now. This is a super exciting way for all of us to combine our efforts and get into these big ecology questions. And I think we can have basic and applied aspects together. This is done by our colleagues in Kruger Park for wild dogs, where they study their movements and then know when they are snared and help them. Or, as Christian also already said, how animals protect animals. When we log the information on animals, they tell us something is happening in the environment, like a poacher is coming, then we can know that. Or disease predictions, again, something in real time where we can make a difference. Now, what's also super important, I think, is that we do lifetime observations because we need to know the Tinbergen principles to really understand what's going on. Otherwise, we can't quite interpret everything. And that does mean we need to know how individuals learn their skills, the ontogeny, what traits help them to survive, the proximate part, and how an individual dies. And that means lifetime tracking and tracking all the traumas that they have during life. Now, that does mean we need better technology. In other disciplines, like in radio astronomy, astrophysics, there is a Smithsonian Harvard National Lab where they develop these instruments. I think we need something on that scale because we also need better quality of instruments, smaller and better and longer lasting. We have to include citizen scientists, and I think Tanya is the champion on that. And we need better databases and standards for interoperability and openness. Now, I want to go through a few of those examples just via the MoveBank ecosystem, because some of that is sort of highlighted in this scheme. It's not all done by that team, but it's highlighted there. So I think for communication, obviously, there's never one size that fits all. So there will always be different systems that people have to adjust to. And they always obey to the same kind of law that you can't beat physics. You know, you need energy. You can't get that by other means than just batteries or capacitors or harvesting. But then we can count on Moore's law that things get much smaller and better in very short amounts of time. And that has happened over the last 1 or 2 decades already. Now, what I see as a massive future trend is that the Internet of Things communication, so that is terrestrially Sigfox and LoRa and others, narrowband IoT, but in space, that was the Icarus waveform that we established. And they actually are now, we are on the verge of combining those into one system where you don't have to worry whether you want to communicate terrestrially or via space in the future. So that is something that I think is very important. You can't communicate a lot of information, but then I come to that in the tags next. And that's super important because we will have AI on chip that's already being implemented right now, real true AI on chip, and open source and cheaper tags, modular tags that can be mass produced. So I think this is a super important trend. And as Christian said, and I fully support that, I think we need wearables for wildlife. So don't ever use the smallest tags on the smallest animals to just barely make it. I fully agree on that. Sometimes that's super important if you need to do something for conservation. But in general, I think it shouldn't happen. It should really be wearables. Now, our team has recently established one open source Wi-Fi enabled solution for biologging. I think that's a very nice trend because it's super cheap. Everybody can produce it. Everybody can use it. There's an application layer. There's an algorithmic layer where you can do machine learning and AI on board. There's a sensor layer, and you can clip on different sensors, audio or environmental sensing or chemical sensing, whatever you want, and the hardware platform. And it's a cheap system. Now, this is where this is being implemented on ear tags in rhinos, for example. So really as a wearable, interestingly, these tags have to be below 20 grams to really be nice and fit in the ear. So they have to be small, which is good and achievable. Or in other animals around these animals to protect them because they tell us when things happen in the environment, like poachers are coming through. Now, I think the really big trend that we have seen over the last years, and that's super important, I think, for the entire discipline, is that we have combined our forces. And this started with analyses like Marley Tucker's and Thomas Muller's data on human alteration of landscape that shorten animal movement. So this No Room to Roam paper that many of you and us are a part of. It's Christian's landmark study on anthropause effects on animals, and the idea to really do that as a global experiment in the future. It's Sarah Davidson's Arctic Animal Movement Archive with hundreds of people that are contributing. So very exciting developments that are really seen by other fields, by the big physics disciplines and chemical disciplines and everybody. And it is applied like what the Audubon Migratory Bird Initiative has done with many other partners to really use these data for conservation. Now, I think we need to be more proactive in including environmental data, the environment in all of those analyses. This is now possible because we do have major Earth observation instruments for the last, well, say 20 to 40 years, depending on what you see there. Landsat for a long time, since 1982. So I think this is something that needs to be standard part of all the analysis, because the animals need the environmental context. And I think it's also really important that we go the route of democratizing the analysis. We have done that through Move apps in the MoveBank system, where you can click together your analyses and really then study the things that you are interested in. For example, we are losing about 30% of our songbirds, both in America and Europe. Conservation managers on the ground need to study, need to analyze in real time, all the time, what's happening there. And this is done by public workflows that can be shared. This can simply be clicked together, so you don't have to be coding in MATLAB or R or Python. So I think those kind of things are really helping to make our analysis and our reach of the data much better. And there are new communication systems. We are now working on the next generation Icarus system. This is GraceEye, Gravity, and Icarus combined. It's a dual satellite pair that is currently in the phase A. That will actually enable us to do tags of much smaller sizes, so way below 1 gram, to communicate on a global scale. And that will then help us to really understand the decline of birds on that scale. So thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Martin. You kind of answered my first question, which was going to be, what are you focusing on next? But I guess you can take the second part of that, which is, what makes you feel most optimistic for the future?
Well, I think it's, I mean, the community of people that is coming together here in these forums and globally. I think that this is not an isolated movement anymore, but it's really a major discipline that's maturing rapidly. Technology is developing super rapidly in the IoT field is amazing, and soon we'll have the same situation as in cell phone technology 25 years ago, where initially every continent had their own system, and now you can take your phone anywhere, and that's the same in IoT in the future. So I think the data gathering will not be the problem anymore. It's going to be the analysis and the global linking of data sets. And I think that's a shift in our focus, but I think it's super exciting.
Okay, there's been a lot of chat about drop-offs and specific innovations, but I don't think they're necessarily things I'm going to put to you. So I'm going to pause for a second and bring you back with our full discussion in about half an hour. So thank you so much, Martin. Tanya, you're going to take the reins next. Do you want to get set up while I do a little introduction? Tanya is a professor and the director of the Translational Data Analytics Institute at the Ohio State University. She's also a founding member and project lead for WildBook, an open source platform which supports the use of AI, computer vision, and citizen science to advance wildlife research. We've invited Tanya here to share her insights as a founder of the field of computational ecology, working at a unique intersection of disciplines and across sectors to create solutions that address questions at the forefront of movement ecology. So Tanya, do you want to take it away?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here and being part of this conversation, and for hosting this conversation. So Martin, that's a tough act to follow. Thank you for kind of great overview and of the future. And Christian, thank you for even more succinct, hitting all the points. So with that, I want to acknowledge the current funders, main funders also of our projects. That's U.S. National Science Foundation, and for most of my research, and Gordon Betty Moore Foundation for WILDME nonprofit work. So with that, where are we now? So starting with where we're now and kind of summarizing maybe even in one slide. So we recently have a paper with many authors, but led by Davis Tue, Ben Kallenberger, and Sarah Beery on and many others, really this kind of survey on machine learning for wildlife conservation. So, you know, the data sources, as was already pointed out, the type of technology that is now used to collect data is growing, has grown exponentially and truly exponentially. I mean, it's multiplying every few months. The type of, not only the type of technology, but also the within each type, you know, the type of drones that are used, the type of data that's collected from drones, you know, the types of sensors, on-body sensors, the environmental sensors, and so on. And increasingly, yes, community science with images and labels. The data analysis also is, you know, the tools are progressing. So basic data analysis, sort of not even the inference, but computer vision tools have grown over the last 5 years massively. This is with the collection of big data sets led by, and the tool development led very much by the big tech companies, and then the kind of tasks that are now possible in the wild from even the images that we have are the you know, everything from very fine grained kind of pose estimation and, you know, down to ears forward without even a lot of tagging, kind of de novo, to species classification, individual ID, environmental reconstruction, and so on. A lot of work on tracking also comes from, and it's been mentioned in previous sessions as well, also comes from developments in human tracking. And again, many sort of tools and methods that can track in unannotated, unprocessed almost videos and series sequences of images. So this is from video. And then there's a lot of recent developments also in time series analysis and machine learning for time series analysis. Much of it is coming from and used in the environmental and movement ecological settings, but comes from even applications like financial fintech and market forecasting. So the one thing has been mentioned also is the aggregation and the connection among these technologies. So maybe we have enough data, as Martin said, although I would very vigorously dispute that, because we have good coverage in some places for some species, for some contexts, but very poor coverage for others. I mean, the fact that you know, IUCN Red List still the conservation status of killer whales is data deficient, you know, tells us that we probably don't have enough data for things that we want to have. And but there are platforms now, you know, including MoveBank and of course eBird, iNaturalist, and Wildlife Insights. This is mostly for data aggregation, and then some of them also include analysis and communities. Also ours, Wildbook, which is the project of WildMe, and then WildLabs and AI for Earth are platforms for tools and community connections and aggregation. So given all of this, what's next? What is like really on the cusp of, if we put, you know, as we said, if we put just enough resources, we can almost brute force it. So a lot of that comes of what's next, in my opinion. First of all, it comes from transferring as it often happens in this field, tools that are developed for human context and for human applications, for tracking humans, for analyzing human behavior, movement, and so on, to adapting them to the context of wildlife biology. And then the other aspect is what is brute forceable kind of is, getting enough data, because this is, the technology here is very much data driven. And so I think in terms of what's next, we've done a lot in the video data analysis and computer vision. And we now have workshops like computer vision for animals in the upcoming major computer vision conference. But the acoustic data analysis is really lacking, and including for movement. And there's a recent paper in Trends in Ecology and Evolution that shows that really, for marine species especially, but also for avian, for birds, acoustic data can be a major source of tracking animals, non-invasively especially, and at much larger scale and higher resolution. The other part, what's next, is what we've done a lot with image data, single data, but we haven't really taken advantage of video data. And there's increasingly video data that's available. And the way that's right now, most of the video data is analyzed and used is essentially broken down into frames. Well, that loses a lot of information. And so we're like really on the cusp of the first methods of really taking full advantage of video data. And I think once we really can do this, once we take full advantage of video data, there's a lot more information, not only on movement and tracking, but also the context and the social context. And so the paper that's shown here and the work that's shown here is specifically using kind of very unsupervised tracking from videos of animals in social context. But there's many other kind of coming up, and again, many of them come from human video analysis work that are being adapted to animal work. The part that's been mentioned both by Christian and Martin is what's really coming up is both intelligent tracking, so increasingly making the tags that are on body tracks, the sensors, intelligent, putting the computation on the tag itself, whether and also non-invasive intelligent tracking, whether it's using multiple UAVs. So this is again a lot of the technology from using UAV swarms, small, relatively quiet, multiple viewpoints, used quite a bit now for search and rescue, with longer and longer battery lives and recharging with different ways, so they can continuously fly as a swarm, and starting to use them for animal tracking and inferring information directly from video on the fly with the computing on board. And I think, this combination of non-invasive, whether it's acoustic trackers, drones, or camera traps, or other devices, both the something that can adaptively follow the animals and put the computing on board, as well as the crowdsourcing and citizen science and community participatory approaches that, again, in some ways, there are sensors that follow the animals and have computing on board and can produce answers adaptively. So we have it's not a paper, it's a quadrennial report of the Computing Community Consortium, which is the essentially think tank of the Computing Research Association, main academic research organization that we just put out as a briefing on AI and citizen science, AI and computational research. So the opportunities, particularly in these kinds of applications of wildlife biology and conservation. And also the non-invasive intelligent tracking is really driven by our ability to do this fine-grained classification, increasingly using biometrics for re-identification, which is the work that we've done a lot, and but also using individual identification and tracking from acoustic data from in the water and as well as in the air. And so I think this is we're really on the cusp of like completely different way of getting data about animal movement. The other big thing, as Martin pointed out, is we it's not enough to have all this data, whether it's tropical ecology, avian ecology, for this species in isolation or that species in isolation, sometimes in the same region. We need to start integrating both the data and the workflows. And so Martin showed a great example of that. We need to do it at much larger scale because, to quote, right, nothing makes sense except in the context of environment and evolution. So we need to put all of those data in the context of environment at the very least, and all the and other species that are there. And so all these platforms that are that are being developed, they're also relatively siloed and kind of bespoke and specialized, whether they specialize on a set of species like eBird, or the type of data like MoveBank, or the type of analysis like WildBook, which is specializing in individual ID, or the type of community like iNaturalist. So we need to start integrating, and we're starting the work. For example, WildMe and Wildlife Insights we were in conversations about connecting the platforms, so then that you don't have to re-enter data from one platform to another, but the analysis can be used between the platform, and similarly, maybe connecting iNaturalist, eBird, and so on, so we can really start building up these global data sets with global context of multiple species, and that really reflect what is happening out there in the nature. And finally, sort of a very technical, what is also happening until now, we've been building kind of bespoke solutions. Yes, we talk for the cyber infrastructure of for each one of these kind of technology-enabled tracking and analysis efforts and projects. The limiting aspect in many of them is the cyber infrastructure, and the infrastructure in general. Do you have the network? So bandwidth, energy, bandwidth, electricity, compute power. What can you put on the sensor itself? What can you put in the field versus what do you need to really do to just, when do you really need to collect the data and use the server for analysis? And so one of the very recently funded US National Science Foundation's Artificial Intelligence Institute, this is a big kind of project, $20 million, is explicitly an institute for intelligent cyber infrastructure with computational learning in the environment. So this is AI-enabled cyber infrastructure for AI that is creating a seamless plug-and-play kind of environment, cyber infrastructure from edge to server. And one of the applications that they're looking explicitly is animal ecology. So full disclosure, I'm part of this project. So that hopefully is coming in the next couple of years. And but it also is, it's a bigger question than what's coming in the next couple of years. So what are the moonshots? And the moonshots, to me, is much bigger scale connection and synthesis, because connecting the existing platforms and the existing data sets still doesn't give us this picture of like all these animals with all the species in the environment as it's happening, right? Down from, and connecting not only data among all the data sets and connecting it adaptively, right? We're leveraging one species to track information about the other, the prey to identify the predator and the poachers, and adapting it to the environmental conditions and so on. But also the technology that connects among people. Some of the platforms like WildBook and iNaturalist and eBird intentionally build in the technology that intentionally connects among people. At the bottom of each Wildbook page, for example, there's everybody who has contributed data about that specific individual. So that forces kind of, because there's not one project or one organization that has information about one individual animal typically. So we have to share data and we have to connect among people. It also, we need a technology and methodology that it connects scales from individual to populations to species, from local, regional to global planetary context, from local temporal in the matter of seconds, which is what typically GPS and other sensors give us, to long-term monitoring over the life of a animal or a population. And then we need connections among models and methods. We're really at the beginning of this effort on the computational side. How do we properly connect methodologies and models, particularly machine learning models? And yes, the infrastructure and the very much at the kind of the frontier of research in AI is human-machine partnership. How do we really properly do this? And to me, sort of the moonshots is kind of creating the whole science of extracting biological information from these different kinds of data. And one of the examples is imageomics, is another new National Science Foundation Institute in harnessing data revolution to establish this whole new field of imageomics, which, like genomics before, extracting information from biological information from sequences, this is extracting biological information from images using biology-guided quantitative computational approaches. Again, this is I'm the director and PI of this effort, and this is a growing community and set of tools, hopefully leading to sort of really truly kind of horizon of explainable AI, where we can tell not only, you know, this is this species, but this is this species because this is this behavior because this is, we're making this prediction because that leads not only this kind of from descriptive technology, the descriptive analysis but to use machine learning, AI and computation to generate hypotheses that then can be tested, because machines see things differently than humans. For example, humans cannot tell you, you know, which of those two pairs of zebras are more similar to each other. We have no way to quantifying similarity of stripe patterns, for example. There are many things that we don't see. There are many behaviors that we're evolutionarily not focusing on, which are meaningful for other species. So can we use computational approaches to extract things that humans may be missing and generate hypotheses that get us away from human biases? And then, of course, all of this has to be in the context of doing no harm. We have to improve, with all of this, we have to improve on existing, including the cost and environmental cost. Technology, all of this technology is energy hungry, rare metals hungry, materials hungry, and water hungry. So, and produces huge, it has huge CO2 footprint. So is it worth it? And we need to protect, worry about the data governance and security, protecting not only the people, but the species, the endangered species information. So in the effort to protect the species, we don't disclose information that can destroy them. And then the dealing with the bias, including data bias, and really democratizing science, which has been mentioned several times, so that the access, which is happening in AI, that the separation between those who have access and those who do not is becoming more and more pronounced. We have to get away from this and ensure that the technology is available to all, and that this technology, we create technology that enables science conservation and public engagement at large scale and high resolution over time, space, and individuals, by bringing communities together and working in partnership to provide solutions that people trust. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tanya. We won't have many questions, but because I'm aware of the time, but your talk has kicked off a big discussion about citizen and community science in the chat. So Paul, I was wondering if you wanted to put your question to Tanya.
Yeah, sure. Hello. So I've noticed the mention of community in all of the talks so far. No doubt they'll appear in all of them. But I'm just, as an online community manager, professionally. I've been doing that for 10 plus years. And an amateur naturalist who does participate in citizen science projects, biological recording specifically, but other stuff as well. I'm just wondering, for people who come from an academic background or research background, how big a role does everyone see community citizen science playing a part in the future of movement ecology tools?
Huge role. So first of all, technology allows us not only to enable better kind of traditional citizen science models and frameworks, but also engaging people where they're at. So for example, one of the tiny examples, we built a bot, a intelligent agent, but it's a bot that scours publicly posted, let's say, YouTube videos of animals and identifies, sends it to like individual ID to Wildbook for the appropriate species, and then posts in the comment, hey, at 2 minutes, 46 seconds in this video of your vacation in Mexico, we found this whale shark. Here's everything we know about it, and the link to the appropriate page or Wildbook of that individual. And the response is, oh, wow, this is amazing. We have like more than half of the people engaged. And the biggest question that they pose, the next question to the bot, right? They realize that this is a bot. Some do, some don't. Is like, how can I help, right? So immediately you make it very personal. The technology makes that not only they saw a whale shark somewhere on their Cancun vacation, but it's this specific whale shark. There are others that saw it. It connects them to others who also saw that whale shark. It gives them a little bit of a story and makes it very, very personal. And they didn't even know that they were contributing to science and conservation by going on vacation. Suddenly they do, and they have probably tons of other videos, and they engage. And we actually see that not only that more than half of the sightings come from these online postings, they're distinct. They're the ones that otherwise were not viewed by other by intentional sort of by other citizen scientists or scientists and conservation projects. So this is an example of how technology can engage and connect people that traditionally may not be part of this participation. We also saw from Martin an example where citizen scientists can not only be data contributors, but pose questions and produce analysis. And there are other examples in astronomy of how people can actually pose questions and use tools. Now, technology can enable people to ask these questions and follow through on the answers, right? So they can be part of the conversation, not only labelers, not only taggers, not only data collectors. And I think, and so the paper that we have on citizen science, AI, and computing outlines some of these opportunities where, and not only that, but people can be now policy evaluators, right? And there are examples in UK actually of noise pollution, where people can collect data that is specific to evaluate different proposed policies, and they have both the agency and the ability with the technology to do that, right? So they can be now part of the entire process. And we have also other examples like the Great Grevis Rally, where it is the ordinary people driving around the country taking pictures, but what enables them to contribute to policy and conservation policy is the trust in the process and the fact that they can follow through their piece of data all the way to the final answer that supports the policy.
Wonderful. Okay, there's a question that David has in the chat, Tanya, that I'd love for you to pick up about acoustic tracking specifically. So if you want to pick that up and have a scroll back through all the conversation that's been happening about motivating citizen science, please do so while we hand over to Ran. I'll bring you back in a few minutes. Ran, do you want to get set up while I do a little introduction? Okay. Ran Nathan is the director of the Minerva Center for Movement Ecology and a professor of ecology at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He's also editor-in-chief of the journal Movement Ecology and co-developer of the Atlas Wildlife Movement System. We've invited Ran here today to share his perspectives as a leading expert and founder of the field of movement ecology, and as someone who continues to help define and advance the discipline as it evolves. So it seems fitting that you have the final talk in this series. So please do take it away.
Wow, thank you so much, Stephanie, and for this initiative. Warm congrats, and thanks to my fellow speakers and for all attendants. It's, I think, a very interesting session. So I'm going to talk about the revolution, the high throughput revolution in movement ecology, and we are facing an era of big opportunities for movement ecology. At the theoretical side, we proposed the movement ecology paradigm 14 years ago. And the focus here was on the individual that moves, and in the context of the environment, including the biotic and abiotic components, and considering the evolutionary trade-offs, traits, and ecological implication, and so on. And there have been further development of this framework and other theories that were advanced so far. And I think the gap here that is still needed is to develop theoretical framework for scaling from individuals to groups, population, and communities. This review in Biological Review 2 years ago attempted to go this way, and it's a good start, but still I think it's one of the major challenges ahead of us. And also we need to scale across a wide range of spatial and temporal scales, and it is an inherent feature of any movement, and there are attempts to try to resolve it, but I think the opportunities there are still quite large, and there's lots to do at this front. In terms of opportunities, real practical opportunities, then we arrange a group initiative in a project in the Isaac Newton Institute in Cambridge that will be active. You see here the dates in July to December next year. And not only it will attempt to scale up from individuals, animals, but also scale down what happens with biological entities that move within individuals like cells. So, and this is all from the perspective of theoretical models, and it's a good opportunity, I think, to advance this field, and I call all of you to register and try to participate in this initiative. In terms of tools that, many years ago, I noticed this dramatic increase in data yield in my own lab. And this was, of course, highlighted in these two reviews that were published in Science back to back in 2015. And what actually one of my first presentation of this drastic increase was in 2013 in a meeting in Scotland, and I was asked, "What are you guys going to do with such a ridiculous amount of data?" And the answer to this fair question was summarized in this paper that was published a few months ago in Science. So it's a review of the technologies and the questions and the opportunities in movement ecology. And if we look at the workflow of movement ecology, so we design a study, we collect the data, we process the data, analyze the data, and publish the outcomes and share the insights. So if we focus on data collection, so these are 8 different tracking systems that are ranges in their capacity to yield big data. And this is what I would like to highlight in particular are reverse GPS systems that the very, very familiar and very useful and helpful GPS systems are known to everybody. Reverse GPS system is different in the way the localization are calculated, not by communicating with satellites and back, which is very energy demanding, but on the system. And this allows us to make tags smaller and smaller. And it has been already emphasized many times in previous talks, the importance of small tags. And this is actually attaining GPS level in accuracy with much smaller tags that are more efficient in terms of data yield. And of course, there are drawbacks like regional scale coverage and installation, and all of these are summarized in here. We established Atlas, which is a reverse GPS system, and this is thanks to a brilliant scientist, a brilliant colleague called Sivan Toledo under the Minerva Center. And the first system was established in the Hula Valley, and now we have several other systems in Israel and in UK, Netherlands, Germany, Mauritius, and some other are planned or in establishment. And what actually we can do is the main feature is ability to yield lots of data very efficiently. So here you see the localization per investment, per US dollars, and the number of tags. And you see that, that reverse GPS, which applies also for acoustic telemetry, using acoustic signals in aquatic systems, then you see that several orders of magnitude more efficient in data yield than GPS, various GPS technologies. And these allow us to provide some new insight into cognitive maps and memory and spatial cognitive ability and all of these. So if I would summarize the contribution of high throughput technology, not only Atlas, but others, is that it allows us to address questions on individual variation in behavior, in movement, in cognitive ability, as emphasized here. So we will get really different and wrong answers if you use low resolution data and instead of high resolution data in all these examples that I will show you now. Another example is biotic interaction. So the number of interactions is multiple with high resolution data and no interactions with the same data subsample. And again, you can look at other important topics, interactions with humans and the environment. So here fish avoid vessels, and if you subsample, you will get a wrong answer. And also a question about spatial temporal scale. If you zoom in, you see a search here. If you zoom in with subsample data, you will see just 1 point. So in all these key questions, then having high throughput tools will further increase our ability to address these big questions, at least in these 4 main questions that are, I guess nobody will argue, are some of the most important questions in the science of ecology, animal behavior, and evolution. And my last emphasis is on using this technology for monitoring, and this was very nicely highlighted in this paper by Walter Goetz, Martin, and Roland and colleagues. And what I would like to emphasize in particular is real-time monitoring. And this has been already started, and for conservation purposes, like this example here, this is maybe the first paper that announced or introduced this concept, and then lions in the gates, and the wonderful example of albatrosses roaming over the Atlantic oceans and using the data to detect illegal vessels. And so all of these are really just starting. And what I think beyond these practical implications, we have with these tools, we have an opportunity to add the experimental aspect to movement ecology. Movement ecology is still largely observational, and we're all aware of the benefits of experimental approach. And this was, for example, shown very, very nicely with RFID, automatic RFID tags that open boxes for different birds of different traits. And they were wonderful inside. It's just visitation. It's not really the tracks, but there are technology that can use this real-time feature that we can all benefit by starting a new line of experimental movement ecology. And my last example is coming for a disaster that happened here in Israel a few months ago, in which 8,000 cranes die out of H5N8 avian flu outbreak. And there was lots of birds killed in poultry, and it's a global problem. We see that in many other places in the world. And we happen to have cranes as part of ongoing project with GPS tags that were tracked over the years, and were in the area, in the focal area of this disease. So beyond the general concept that there's a strong correlation between bird migration and spread of these disease outbreaks, that we found out that this is the feeding station. You hear the cranes, and what this huge aggregation of 50,000 cranes in one spot is wonderful to see the birds for tourists. It's important for agriculture because they make damage in the agricultural fields, but the risk here and always been for epidemics. And this happened this winter. And actually, we found out that a signature for these events in our tag birds, and very early on in the epidemic dynamics, we already told the government actually that it's not about a few dozens of birds that were found so far. It's about thousands of birds, according to percentage of the birds that we track, and they were injured or died or infected. And you can see here that we can analyze the movement data and the acceleration data, and nail down the fine-tailed dynamics of individual level changes. And so we can focus the death of individuals from this outbreak 3 days in advance based on the movement data, and 7 days in advance based on the acceleration data. And we also found out that some of the cranes probably infected and recovered. And you see this signature here of a low activity, and then back to the normal activity in these individuals. So it's very helpful to know that they do recover from disease, and you don't want to see the symptoms of these birds when they are infected. And one individual was roaming over the whole area, and which is quite exceptional. It's individual variation, a topic that I mentioned before. And his signature is quite strong all the period. He was not in the Hula Valley, which is here, but might have been he has been there in the beginning before everybody else, and might have been infected and recovered and then moved on. So another important insight was the option of a second wave with the spring migration, cranes from Ethiopia that migrated north and came up. We were afraid that there will be a second outbreak, and therefore we really pushed the government to stop the diversionary feeding. And eventually this was, we hope, helpful, because the cranes stopped at much longer times at the Kula during spring. But we now know that that they died along the way during migration. And so there's so much information that we can obtain for this kind of data for ongoing problem that we have no other tools to get this kind of data. So this long list of options that in general a tracking system can provide us is enormous. It's never been applied in any management of outbreaking disease, and for me, it's a wonderful examples. There are, of course, problems and drawbacks of this, but if you can manage to do this, then I think it's a good, it's a wonderful use of this technology. So we should develop high throughput real-time tracking tool to boost up the experimental approach in movement ecology and to steer the management of human-wildlife conflict, human and wildlife health, and various other major environmental problems. And with that, and with the thanks to my dream team, my collaborators, and the funding agency, and all of you for your attendance, also many editors of movement ecology who are now here. Thank you all, and looking forward for the future in movement ecology.
Thank you so much, Ran. Quite conscious of time, so I'm actually going to move us straight into the open discussion. Do you want to stop sharing? I think all of our speakers really understood what we're asking, and it's been such a fascinating view of all of the different directions and questions and areas you think are of most importance. In registration, we found that many participants brought up a lot of the potentially game-changing advancements you guys have mentioned today, like passive abundance detection, deploying tags without animal capture, IoT meeting movement ecology, edge computing and microsensors, etc. And just thinking about the second and third horizon framework, I'd love to hear from you, because I'm feeling quite overwhelmed by just how much you've just laid out here. Could you narrow in and tell us, like, what's one thing you think we should inject resources into now for relatively immediate impact? And what's one area you're excited for that requires that long-term investment for the blue sky innovation? And who's going to take it first? Christian, we've not heard from you for the longest, so do you want to have a crack at it first?
Yeah, I'm happy to have a stab at that. If you think back to this framework I showed that illustrated all the different things that need to come together to pull off a movement ecology study. So the people who make the technology, the people who analyze the data, and so on and so on. I think most of us are experts at one or two of those pillars or blocks, but we are not experts at everything. And I think what is currently happening in the field is that we tend to chase the progress and successes of our peers who are experts in other things. So if you're very good at building tags, you constantly try to stay on top of what is happening on the data analysis side of things, and vice versa. And I think what is really needed is to move the field perhaps from this reactive mode of operation, where we are constantly responding to progress that is being made elsewhere, to a proactive mode where we come together and plan ahead of doing the research. So if you think about all the big science experiments, if you think about the CERN accelerator or the Hubble telescope or whatever, all these experts came together to plan that. It wasn't an afterthought. And I think there's huge potential for like coming together for these planned big studies. And I know that that is happening on a study level and, you know, on a study system level. And they're very exciting examples, which I think provide a proof of concept. They show that this really leads to these big transitions in terms of insight. But I think as a community, we can perhaps do better to build these bridges across all the different components that are necessary to deliver success.
Tanya, I'm going to throw you in a second. Just let me throw to Martin first, because Martin, I've heard you talk quite often about this, what did you call it? The international lab, the national lab model. And does that speak into what Christian's talking about?
Yes, absolutely. I think we are sort of at the verge of where astronomy was 50 years ago, when everybody had their little telescope, and then they finally combined it, and now there's just one global telescope with combining all the space and Earth observations. And I think that's what Christian is alluding to, and I fully 100% agree. I mean, this is where our field should go, and will go if we take it the right direction. And I mean, from an angle of technology, I would say, I mean, combining what Tanya is doing on the AI and putting that on board the animals, I think is super important. It's doable now. It increases the efficiency on the animal, the information by orders of magnitude, and to have a global readout. Because if you have animals that do things outside of your reach, then you lose the most important information. If you can't find all the animals where they are dying and what they're doing outside of your regular reach, I think it's not useful. So those kind of things, global experiments, and those two technologies, I think, are super important.
We had Modus talk in the last event, and what they're doing is amazing to link up and capture different data sets, but it seems so limited to have it just in this one part of the world. And I guess that's part of what Icarus is trying to do, right, as well, trying to link that all up.
Well, and others, I think it doesn't really matter. I mean, you just need readout systems and the right kind of waveform. There are certain waveforms that are good for terrestrial communication, others for space, because you need a Doppler shift resilience. So, and that's what Icarus is designed for. But it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's really just a global readout.
Tanya, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was very much going to say yes, and very, very, very big yes, and sort of reemphasizing this the need. I think the immediate, both the immediate and the moonshot need for investment to connect different efforts, different groups, different data, different models, different aspects of study, from biology to technology and back, and geographic kind of locations, and to really drive towards synthesis, because we, including sort of at the model and understanding level, because right now we don't have the ability sort of from the immediate to connect, as I already said, to connect among this data with this method, and then down to that platform, right? So this is right now very, very, very difficult. And I know this is a big part of the Wild Labs mission, but to kind of upstream investment is this international lab model, which I think the only way to have synthesis. And I think the funding agency, the government funding agencies are not yet good at recognizing the need for this large scale technology to science and science to technology big consortia. Imageomics Institute is the first investment of this kind of the National Science Foundation, and the only one at the moment. And so I think there needs to be more, and there needs to be international efforts.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm gonna come back around to funding and like how to make this model work, but I first wanted to give Ran a space to answer the question or add your own thoughts.
So I think that the emphasis on the importance of collaboration across disciplines and internationally is well taken. I think we are already there. I think there are wonderful examples like MoveBank, Icarus, Atlas, and others that Image. How you say it, Tanya?
Imageomics. Imageomics. Like consider proteomics, imageomics.
So I think initiatives are already there, and the success is motivating other initiatives. And my short-term goal is to prove that these technologies can advance basic and applied science. That's the most important thing. It's involved lots of investment, and we need to show the world that this is yielding benefits for basic science and for humanity and applied science and so on. And I think in the longer term, our job is to put this field as in the front of science, as a competitor for the really big money that goes now to other fields, and because of the sake of the environment and the global concern, and also because of the basic science insight that we can provide. So I still do not see, except very rare examples, lots of funding opportunities for this kind of work. And I think we are in duty to change this trend and make this field more appreciated and better funded.
Christian.
Yeah, just to respond to Ran there, I think this is a really good point. I mean, we ultimately try to drive forward global conservation efforts, and one of the big challenges of our time is to preserve terrestrial and marine life on this planet. And I think one of the key challenges for that is to get a good mechanistic understanding of how wildlife and humans interact. And I think our community has become really good at tackling the animal side of things, and this is what we've heard today. But in previous sessions and in other fora, people started realizing that we shouldn't neglect the human side. And of course, there are disciplines that are primarily concerned with tracking humans rather than animals. And those communities have started talking to each other. And I see huge potential for collaboration and for synergy there. If we want to understand how animals move across the landscape, well, we need to know where the humans are, because chances are that human movements affect animal movements directly or indirectly. So I think there is an opportunity for really exciting collaboration across these disciplines of animal and human tracking.
Jenna, do you want to jump in with your question or your comment?
Sure. Yeah, I was just thinking of the potential importance of the environmental data collected by animal tags for climate researchers, oceanographers, people in that more physical environmental science group. And I was wondering if there's already any agencies that link our two research areas together so that they have an opportunity to use those data and maybe help us as well to identify how the environment affects animal behavior.
I think the marine field is much better here. I mean, they use elephant seals since a long time at NOAA. There's a buoy structure that is basically designed towards elephant seals. They are super important, and I think that's a model that we should use also terrestrially. There are some people that are starting that. Diego Elizondo from Yale is putting forward a concept right now on that side, and several others have already. So I think there is a really good way to do that also terrestrially, and I think that should be done. Also for weather forecast, we've seen during COVID that the weather forecasts were worse because there were fewer planes giving data and animals could jump in. all the time. So very exciting, and I think that's an immediate thing that we could do.
Ethics is something that's come up and been touched on in different talks, but it's never had a full part of the discussion. So Lucy, I wanted to give you space since you've brought it up. Do you want to jump in?
Just to ask the question, really. So I was hosting the technical side of the student conference in conservation science in March in Cambridge, and there was a brilliant talk about the ethics of tracking humans, or the ethics of what the information about human activity that's captured on camera traps, what happens to it, what can be done with the effect it has on the local communities. And I'm just curious to know what this group of people, what knowledge is out there already, who is thinking about the ethics and how that ties in to the work that's already been done.
I can start on the AI side of things, but Christian, I see you're unmuted, so you want to start?
Tanya, I reckon you can go, and then we'll throw to Christian.
Go for it.
Okay, so there's several aspects. I mean, there's the general AI ethics part, which is particularly in sort of technology ethics, which is relevant to this whole conversation. One is that if we look today at like top 10 AI researchers, or where there's a huge bias on who they are, like they're all male, no matter which top 10 you're looking at. Who is working, who's producing, where AI and technology is produced. Again, globally, there's the huge imbalance, and it is super, 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 super expensive. So one of the biggest kind of changes that needs to be done is that it has to be, the whole process has to be inclusive, collaborative partnership. It needs to be changed how the solutions are created, meaning that they have to be with those whom they intended to benefit, not for them, and there has to be global capacity building massively at scale, so that we don't leave out whole demographics behind and whole regions behind as we're creating the technology and the solutions. The other aspect is transparency and accountability. So open source, open process, and explainability. So, but particularly open source and open process, transparent process. And there is a difference between, and which are often used interchangeably, but there is a difference between explainability, interpretability, and transparency. So explainability is a moonshot, as I said. It's way into the future. Interpretability is probably doable, and transparency is necessary, and it's now, meaning we have to be clear about what goes into the process, and everybody has to be able to examine the data sets and the code and the process. The other aspect is the clear uncertainty and assumptions and limits, and the responsibility for outcomes. We have to take engineers, we have to be able to stand under the bridge. But the biggest part is the do no harm. It's the technology safety, the AI safety. It has to be improvement on the existing, and it, as I said, including the cost and the environmental impact. But the other aspect, and we wrote about it, the security and privacy, not only on human data, but what's gold for scientists and conservation managers is also highly useful for wildlife criminals. For example, geotagged images of endangered species, right, are beacons if used quickly or intelligently, because you don't even need the data within the last 2 minutes if you can predict where the animals are going to be. So we wrote Privacy for Tigers white paper about this, which focused mostly on the security aspect of animal data, geotagged images specifically, but there are huge privacy implications, and it's very different privacy than privacy for humans, because for technical reasons, you cannot use things like differential privacy. So we need to address it before we start putting out all these data sets that are leaking that information, right? There's also huge issues of bias when you combine different data sources. And Sarah Beery, I encourage I think, second session of this series. Sarah Beery gave a great talk about, a great part of her talk was about bias and fairness. So I'll stop there. And the just kind of what we don't have specifically in anything that's related to animals is we don't have any policy. So AI ethics and AI Act, whether it's the European or a Union one, or the various aspects that are now AI policy governance that are happening in the US, none of them address anything that has to do with animals. Right? We don't have animal privacy policy. We don't have animal ethics policies that are, and particularly in this case, every issue is crossing political boundaries, whether local or global. So not only we don't have anything local, we also have very little that can be used internationally.
So I'm quite conscious of time, and I do have a final question I want everyone to answer. So Christian and then Rand, do you have anything you want to jump in and add on the ethics front?
I just wanted to mention in response to Lucy's question that there is extensive expertise on the geoprivacy side of things and the human geography and GIS community, but that expertise is not immediately available to many of us who study animals, non-human animals. And I mean, we experience firsthand with our initiative that looks at these animal lockdown responses that it's actually incredibly difficult for us to get access to the human tracking data. So those data sets are being used, they are available, but they are effectively unavailable to our community for merging with our animal tracking data. And so there's work that needs to be done to unlock the potential, I think, of the existing data sets, technologies, and expertise.
Rand, anything you wanted to add additionally?
Yes, so I would like to remind us that our ethical responsibility is make the best use of this data. And if we use invasive methods, then we need to make the best use of this data. And I think the best practice is to integrate systems. And for example, if tagging of any kind give you a whole track of individuals, then you're still not, a black box is what other individuals are doing next to this, the few individuals that we track, what is the environment and so on. And therefore, if we integrate, for example, computer vision and tracking and at the right scales, then we make the best use of this effort. We combine invasive and non-invasive methods and make the best use of these efforts and minimize the disturbance to the animals and maximize the yields for both basic and applied science.
Thank you. Okay, I realize we're on the half hour, but I just want to give everyone a space for final thoughts and to just ask what I'd love to hear each of your visions for, like, if we're 10 years down the road looking back, where have we got to? What does this field look like 10 years into the future? And any other last takeaways you'd like to share with the group? Martin, do you want to start?
Sure, thanks a lot. Well, I think it's fantastic to have a field that has so many young people and so many enthusiastic people. That's rare. There's a huge potential. And I think that data gathering will be fairly standard in 10 years. Data analysis will be a lot more, or will gain a lot more emphasis. And I think that we will have global readout systems that will enable us to do the kind of global experiments that Christian highlighted.
Wonderful. Thanks, Martin. Tanya, do you want to share your thoughts? Where do you think we're going in 10 years, and any final things to take away?
I think, you know, the building on the vision that Martin articulated, we will have the technology kind of to get an instant reading of, hopefully, of any region, of any anywhere, at any scale. And what I'm hoping that we will have arrived through all of the integration is really systems level kind of understanding of what's going on by integrating all of this together.
Ran, where do you think we're going to be in 10 years? And any other final thoughts?
We're going to have incredible insight into some of the most fascinating phenomena in nature. This is, for me, the main goal. And many of them are, of course, important for humanity and so on, but some are not that important, but still fascinating to learn. And I am looking forward to a new generation of both tools and ideas that will address the big questions that are still unanswered, and there are so many. Yeah, as long as I'm gaining experience with this field, I feel that I still don't understand basic things, and I think we should address the big questions and the best we can.
Thanks, Ran. And Christian, final word.
I think through this vision of collaboration and synthesis, we will see step changes in our understanding of mechanistic causal links. I think especially with experimental manipulations, we will get a much better understanding of what drives different processes. And I also hope that even in 10 years' time, there will be things happening which we are currently struggling to imagine. I think the field is currently developing at such a pace that it'll surprise all of us where it'll take us, I think.
I think one of the things that's come out most strongly is that these conversations and the calls for collaboration and integration and data sharing have come through so strongly in the movement ecology focus that we've had, but we've also hear it in every aspect of conservation tech from across our sector. So, and as part of, we heard it come through very, very clearly in our state of conservation tech research that we published at the start of the year. And so I think it's a huge reason for optimism that this call is echoed, not just for movement ecology, not just for biologging, but for acoustics, drones, every aspect of how technology is interacting with conservation. And I think it gives us reason for a huge amount of optimism and huge questions about how we get there and how we fund it and who will help us get there. But it's an encouraging vision for the future. So I'd just like to conclude this whole series by saying a huge thank you to every single one of our speakers and our advisory group and everyone that's come along to all 4 events. It's just been so fantastic to hear from so many different experts and the ideas and enthusiasm from this field. So we hope you've enjoyed this season. We will be continuing in the next stage of the project, which will be smaller focus groups. But if you'd like to participate in them, please reach out to us. We're looking for an interesting mix of participants. So yeah, reach out to our team at the community at WILDLABS.NET. But I'd also say these sort of events are the things that Wild Labs was created to run, and our whole goal is to create spaces to bring together the community to have discussions like this. So please do join us on our platform at WILDLABS.NET. We have a group for biologging and AI for conservation and many, many other technologies and different applications. So please join us in the community, and we hope we'll see you there. And a huge thanks to the Moore Foundation for supporting this whole series and this bigger project, and for collaborating with us to pose the question of where we need investment to catapult the field forward and to help us create spaces to ask the questions of what it could look like in the future. So it's been a lot of fun, and we'll see you back here for events in the very near future. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Stephanie, from all of us. Thank you.